Stormgate. Will it replace StarCraft 2 as the defining real-time strategy game of our aging generation? Is it just Warcraft 3 with mechanical peasants? Will Frost Giant Studios make good on their promise that the third faction will be anime Catgirls? The answer to these pressing questions will not be found in this video today, but instead I'd like to do a deeper dive in something I think is quite important, especially to real-time strategy games, which is, believe it or not, gameplay. Yes, at the end of the day, I've said I'll play blue circles versus red squares, as long as it's well supported and it feels good. And you can't build a solid house without a sturdy foundation. And with Stormgate, I think we have that foundation. Might need some repainting, maybe a bit of remodeling, but at the end of the day, that's what's important. So I want to spend a little time going into a lot more detail about the similarities, differences, tips and tricks and all that in Stormgate so far. And I thought I'd get an expert opinion. So if you enjoy and you want to see more, or at least you appreciate the effort, be awesome if you could like and subscribe, and let me know which one was the most helpful. So instead of just talking about it myself, I thought I'd bring in the resident expert, the current only Stormgate champion, Team Liquid's Mana, Protoss in StarCraft 2, but Infernals in Stormgate. How you doing, Mana?
Thank you for having me. I'm fantastic. Can't wait to speak to Stormgate. Very excited for the game.
So, you have played professional StarCraft 2 for as long as I can remember, and you've played Protoss, but now you've chosen Infernals in Stormgate specifically. I know obviously you know plenty about Vangaurd, but why Infernals over Vangaurd? And you seem to be pretty set on that choice, so tell me more about it.
So first of all, I chose Infernals because in all of the games that I play, I just don't like to play as a human faction. Like even when I was playing a little bit of, like World of Warcraft, like other RPG games, I would never choose to play as a human. I just like the other species more. So yeah, even in StarCraft 2, I never played like Terran, StarCraft 1 as well. So I chose Infernal because of that in Stormgate. I even chose it before they announced how the units work, but it also lines up very well because the way that the Infernal unit production works is kind of similar to the Protoss StarCraft 2 warping mechanic. So it just lines up pretty well for me, I think.
All right, I want to change gears into something we probably should have led with just early on, which is the basic resources of Luminite and Therium. And so talk to me about any tips, tricks, maybe basic math about both of them. We'll start with Luminite. How does Luminite work?
12 workers mine Luminite, and there are like two sections of where your bobs are mining from. There's
Would
like
you call them
outside
patches, potentially, even?
You can call them whatever you want. Like I don't think nobody really sets the name for it yet, but there's going to be either the outside and the inside of the Luminite mine, and the outside patch or the outside of the mine can be gathered by free bobs, while the middle one can still be gathered by free, but it's not as effective. So what you want to do is to have 2 bobs per the middle line, I would say, and the 3 bobs per outside. So it would be 10 workers. So the fact that you have it right here is incorrect. But the thing is, the bobs then or the workers, they don't go automatically to the outside. They first saturate the inside, the middle ones, and then they go to the outside. So right now, once you pull the additional 2 bobs to the outside, they will go to the outside. And now you can pull the 2 workers from the inside. And that will be the most cost-effective way to saturate your Luminite mine. This is the perfect. So focus on doing this for your bases. And then once you have, let's say, 2 or 3 bases mined, you can saturate the additional 2 bobs to make it 12 out of 12.
So this is definitely your higher level, not a huge difference, as you're still getting a benefit from 11 and 12. It's just not nearly as much. So the best, most ideal, I guess this would be the 16 out of 16 in SC2, where everybody has a job and they're not waiting around for it, whereas 12 out of 12...
I think this would be more of a 20 out of 16. I think the difference is quite big because the 11 and the 12 from the middle, they really don't get that much value. While they still give you some value, it's not as significant because you can see from the middle, they just basically, they don't even, there's very little waiting time in here. So yeah, I would say it's more 20 out of 16.
So there is you are better off long distance mining over 12 as well, because there is no way to get additional resources.
That's right. The more than 12, there's just no value whatsoever.
All right, so if you have the extra bobs and you don't have any bases to send them to, then you could maybe put some on Therium, which also has some interesting details to it as well. Talk to me about Therium, how it works, and when you should mine it.
So a lot of the time, all of the time, there are two ways that you can mine Therium. Sometimes it is hidden in like the crates, or I don't even know what to call it. Like there's like this thing. I don't know. You just have to destroy it, and then like it expands Therium out of this spot. And some maps have it immediately open. And over time, this Therium will be enriched, which is going to be glowing around. I'm not exactly sure about the mechanic of it. I think you don't mine the patch immediately. I think it has like either 2 or 3 times that you can mine it in and out. I'm not sure the exact math about that. So it just like basically it gives you more Therium when it glows. I don't have that much specifics. I'm not.
I believe
unless you know it.
Actually, what happens is they mine it twice as fast. I believe is what happens. Let's see if I can test it here. But when it's enriched, it isn't more, but instead it is more quickly. So that guy's obviously going to mine first. You can even see him popping them into their backpack there.
That's right.
Yeah, by the time the first guy goes back, already done 2 trips.
Yeah, almost twice as fast, yeah.
But there is a finite amount per patch, so you could put the worker count. Honestly, I don't know when and why it turns red, because obviously we're not mining out the patch with 2 here. I think that's still being worked out. But from what I understand, 4 workers will still allow some of it to enrich over time, because once it reaches a certain amount of patches, that's when, instead of adding more patches, which would eventually grow to take up the whole map, which I think we're trying to avoid, some of the Therium enriches. Now, I haven't seen too many players of any level really focusing on that as a specific mechanic, but definitely switching between like a couple and like 8 workers on Therium to hit some specific timings is not uncommon. Or just, trying to mine out maybe more contested patches quickly, so that way you can get it done, or at least get the most benefit before your workers are potentially vulnerable, especially at the outlying bases.
Definitely, the interesting mechanic is that you can mine a lot of it pretty much at once. If you're missing some Therium, just pull 12 as many workers as there are patches, and you can mine a lot of Therium in a short period of time. In StarCraft 2, you can only mine gas with 3 workers at a time, and it doesn't speed up whatsoever. Here you can pull lots of workers, get a big boost of Therium quite immediately. So that's definitely a different mechanic and interesting one that you can maybe find some later on timing attacks where there's like more enriched Therium when you need it.
I think this is actually probably the biggest disparity from SC2 with the resources. Even though the kind of mining mechanics are similar, one, with Infernals, you don't have this Therium, or I guess it's called a scrapyard. I think it was literally called the refinery in earlier build. Oh my god. Fun fact, all workers can only mine 1 per patch. So eventually if it mines out, you can only have so many doing it. But you do have to build a shrine nearby, otherwise you're going to be walking a while, right, for Infernals?
That's right, yeah. The Infernals, for now, they don't have this kind of scrapyard or the refinery. I don't know if they eventually plan to add it for the Infernals, but yeah, that's the difference between the 2 factions for now, that the Vanguards can make a building specifically for mining Therium.
Do you find this to be a big limiting factor, or do you just end up adding more shrines?
I think that's depending on the map. Like, for example, on this map, we can see the Therium is pretty far away from both of these bases. And I think the Infernals are very Therium dependent. The units cost lots of Therium, while the Vanguard bio, which is we're focusing on here as a Vanguard player, doesn't cost that much Therium. So I would say this is worse for the Infernals in the current version.
All right, good to know. And yeah, definitely a mechanic that I think is very unexplored and might have some tweaking, but I really hope it stays in its kind of sort of fluctuating state. I find it a lot more interesting than, all right, he's taken 2 more gases, which will give him exactly this much more gas to do the builds. But as a caster, I find that to be a little more interesting. Anything else about, another note is that the creep camps all provide amounts of resources. Is this a factor in the, any part of the game really, but especially in the early game?
For the Vanguard, I think you just need to kind of like figure out how many units you need to destroy a certain camp, which will allow you to move across the map or just on the map more freely. The camps are actually, quite difficult to destroy, so you just need to know how many units it takes for you not to lose any. Just try to make sure that you don't lose units while doing the camps. For Infernals, it's more important because you try to also get the camps infested by the Gaunt, so you get the free fiends out of them. For the Vanguard, it's just making sure that you don't lose a lot of health on your units because your opponent can be, jumping on you and you have a lower amount of HP because you took too much damage on the camp.
So in the later game, is it something that you'll go out of your way for, or is it just if you're happening by, you'll take a camp, like 150 plus supply?
Okay, well, it depends about the situation on the game, but because of the camps, they are leveling up, which means that they provide more resources for that. It is a significant difference that you can get additional big unit or even additional 2 big units if there are, tier 2 resources camps nearby. I think they are definitely useful. You cannot really ignore all the camps, that's for sure. The way that you use them, it's up to you.
Is your main focus Infernal versus Infernal? I've seen a lot of people going straight for the speed camp, and that is explicitly because there are 4 creeps there, which means 4 more fiends. Not so much for the actual speed itself. Is that correct?
I can now use my expertise and tell you immediately that this is indeed 5 goats in there in the speed camps, not 4. That's why I'm an expert here. So I think it depends on the map, right? So in the open beta, we were playing 2 maps already, Broken Crown and Secluded Grove. In both of these maps, you do have speed camps. In one of them, you have 2 speed camps. On the other one, you do indeed have 4 of them. So it is definitely the priority. So because you get like 5 fiends and you also speed them up because of the speed camp, you just get even much more control. And some people even use a worker to bring with you on this specific map that you're currently showing, where they just pick a worker and then try to destroy the trees near the speed camp or build a building like you are doing right now, just to tank some of that damage from the speed camp and then just move forward across the map to other set of resource camps.
Oh yeah, that's another mechanic in Stormgate is workers can, I'm just going to do it here, but workers can take down trees. And most of the terrain so far is just simply trees in Stormgate, besides maybe like your main base ramp sort of area. So just, I don't really know if I have a question or a tip there, but what do you think about the trees? How do you factor them into your gameplay? Just what other terrain related things do you find your games kind of revolving around?
So the trees also come in 2 different sizes. The trees near your natural base, by the way, you can hide your worker in there, inside of it, or a small unit like a Gaunt, a Fiend, or as Vanguard the dog, whatever. Or Lancers, Exos can also go in here. But the big units like the Brute, I think Medtech might not be fitting there, but not exactly sure on that. But yeah, the small units can fit through. The big guys cannot fit through. It's definitely an interesting mechanic. The Vanguards are definitely using this kind of mechanic to sneak in dogs into these trees, just to see the army movement around, because the dog has this kind of like a sensor ability where you can see like these little exclamation marks of
essentially gives you a sensor
units.
Tower.
Basically, yeah, like a mobile sensor tower. That's true. And then you have the big trees which you can cut down as well. I think it takes 2 hits of a worker. It's definitely something different than in StarCraft, because you do have kind of like a destructible rocks in StarCraft, but here the terrain is definitely created a lot from the trees, which you can destroy even with like the Magmadon's ability or Vulcan's ability from the Vanguard. Also, I just noticed that recently that you can destroy the trees from the big guys, the Hellborns. The Hellborns attack actually does destroy the trees, somewhat similar to the Atlas attack. I did not know about that actually.
I think it doesn't have. Well, if I have this Magmadon, go stand over there, sir, and then
take the shot. That's right. You destroy the trees as well.
Yeah, the Magmadons obviously with their trample ability, but that's a bit not very nuanced. Like if you want to cut through 1 or 2 trees, good luck with that. I think it looks cool, but yeah.
if you use the ability of the Magmadon as well to cut down the trees, and your opponent is like right behind the trees or trying to set up an ambush, you don't have the ability of the Magmadon immediately into the fight. So it's also nice to know that you can like save this ability and destroy the trees with the Hellborne to give you just this kind of like little advantage.
We were talking about the most obvious but kind of forgotten mechanic, if you've been playing a while, is Shroud for the Infernals. So tell me about Shroud and the details, what you like, what you don't like, how it works. Shroud.
Shroud. So yeah, this is the mechanic for the Infernals. Like it works kind of like Shield, I would say, for Protoss players in StarCraft 2. You have this additional health that regenerates over time on Shroud, and you don't lose it over time that you're outside of Shroud. So that's also pretty cool. Some units have better regeneration on Shroud than the others. So basically, the more white health you have, the faster it regenerates on Shroud. So for example, Magmadon's
percentage based, or
it might be. So I'm not exactly 100% sure. I'm not that technical about it.
It definitely isn't like Zerg regeneration, where it's just like 1 health per like 2 seconds or something, where an Ultra will take half a year to heal up. It comes back quickly.
Yeah, so if you notice, Magmadon is healing up very quickly, but I think the fastest is Weaver, which regenerates on Shroud very, very quickly. And one of the things that I would say,
I gotta get.
It's kind of Let's wait a bit. Let's wait for a bit for the Weaver, right? Maybe.
Yeah. Well, okay. I want to pivot a bit before we get back to Shroud, because what doesn't it do? It doesn't give you, to my understanding, a speed bonus like it does for many Zerg units in StarCraft 2. The regeneration is limited to the white health. Your basic health, is there any way to regenerate it outside of the healing camps for the Infernals?
The healing camps don't regenerate white health. I think they only regenerate the green health.
Your green health. Your your non-shield. Is there any way to regenerate that for Infernals?
I think not, other than the camps, right? So basically, for Vanguard you can heal it, but for Infernals, basically as Protoss, you just take damage and it's kind of permanent, unless you go to the regeneration camp.
So yeah, I see the comparisons with Protoss now more and more.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you have a Terra nearby, well, that's too bad. I believe it's actually similar in co-op, but. So Shroud is much more of like essentially a large shield battery for all your units that doesn't run out of energy.
That's a good comparison. Yeah, but also one of the things, I think it's very easy to mistake that you need to build on Shroud as Infernals, which is not the case. You can build.
It's hard to get out of that habit.
Yeah, it feels like, I need to build within this area, right? Just like Undeads, for example, in Warcraft 3 or Zergs in StarCraft 2, you can easily build outside of that Shroud. That Shroud is basically here for white health and for gathering possibly more Animus.
Yeah. Honestly, as Infernal, I haven't really found occasion, like I'll try to get Shroud in the fight, and I think this brings us to the kind of overlap, which is the top bar abilities. So I'm just going to read through them real quick, and then we can go down the line. The first is Summon Effigy, which is like a Shroud tumor in an area. Easily killed, but very cheap on energy, so you can get kind of like a spot shield battery action. You have Hellspawn Resurgence, which refreshes your targets, or refreshes the charges on a shrine, or your just production facilities in general. So I've seen this mostly used to, especially early on, you can repop it, you got 3 more charges, pop out 3 more imps. Then Nightfall Infestation, which gives you Infest and Vision Reduction on a bunch of different units, that are in the area. But I've noticed it is a little inconsistent overall, but the effect does apply. And then you have a Super Pylon that shoots very quickly and really needs to, I believe this tooltip very much needs to be changed near an existing friendly shrine as opposed to shrine, because that small detail is very relevant in my experience. But essentially, it summons a super Shroud Stone. Oh yeah, I guess the Shroud Stone does a little bit of an attack, but I think it is more emotional damage than real damage. Before we get into the 2 big abilities, let's just go down the line, and then we'll talk about Shroud Stones. Summon Effigy. When are you using it?
To be honest, I have used it very little. I feel like it's so easily killable. It's literally like one hit away from your opponent. It has like no HP whatsoever, and the regeneration of the white health of these small units, like not Magmadons, not Weavers, is not really significant. Especially in Infernal versus Infernal, both Infernal players do benefit from the same Shroud, so it doesn't matter if you do the effigy, your opponents will still benefit from that. And versus Vanguard, the fights are like so all over the place that I really don't use it that much. I really used this ability maybe 2 or 3 times in my lifetime, and I didn't find a significant change if I used it or not.
I could see maybe if buildings required it, it could find some use, but as it stands, yeah. Infernal, just like Zerg versus Zerg, creeps creep. So you have that kind of confusion. Now, what about Hellspawn Resurgence? I see a lot of people calling it Inject because it's like getting more larvae for your hatcheries.
So I think this is by far the strongest ability in Infernals, and I would say even overpowered. It's extremely powerful because the Infernal production works in charges, and each production building, be it Shrine or Iron Vault or just any other production facility, you can hold max of 3 charges per each building. And it refreshes all charges at the same time. So like you just showed just a moment ago, you can get 3 imps, again 3 imps, and again 3 imps, because there's no cooldown on this ability. So you can constantly use it as long as you do have enough animals. And the later the game goes, well, you have plenty of animals. So you can get your economy going immediately. You can get your production units going immediately, as long as you have the money for it and the animals. So I think it's a very, very strong ability, and by far the strongest one as Infernal, I think.
I think it's at this time we got to mention that any unit dying counts, including your own. Which technically, if you're desperate for more, you could technically kill your own units in order to get Animus. And in fact, that brings us, I think, to the meat farm. So talk to me about the meat farm, the supply farm for the Infernals.
So yeah, this is not your typical overlord or supply depot that you have in other games. This is a different mechanic. So when you build a meat farm, which works as a supply building, you also spawn Fellhogs around it. I think each Fellhog spawns every 20 seconds, something like that. And then I think it spawns 3, and then it cannot spawn more. And once it spawns more, it just kills the other Fellhog, which also gives you the Animus for it.
There is quite a explanatory animation right next to it.
What?
There.
I didn't see this.
Yes, it is consistently chopping up what I have to assume are bite-sized portions of Fellhog. And oh my god. Yes, every 20 seconds, if you see something pop out, that's them butchering a Fellhog, which is relevant because it does count towards your Animus. Now, Fellhogs don't count for much supply, but I found if you have about 10 meat farms, that gets you up to like a couple Animus a second. So is it a reliable source? I mean, it doesn't hurt, but it's actually a little hidden mechanic. Both the animation and the Fellhogs themselves. Now, on top of that, I've seen a lot of players kind of using the Fellhogs, especially against Vanguard, because they're a bit of a dicey tool against Infernals because they can be infested as well, which let's hope maybe we reconsider that. But against Vanguard, especially, how would you recommend, like, where would you place your meat farms, especially your first few?
I think the very first few meat farms I would definitely place near my... I always want to say mineral lines because I'm always so used to StarCraft 2, right? So basically your resources.
Your Luminite pile.
Yeah, your Luminite piles or Therium piles as well, I suppose. So yeah, close to your resources basically, because as a Vanguard player, you kind of want to harass the Infernal player worker line with your dogs that you are very easily getting into the early game. So the Fellhogs can protect you from that, or at least buy you a couple of seconds. So definitely would recommend that. And later on in the game as well, just in some kind of like choke points to let the Fellhogs block the units from running through so easily. You can combine them into like a wall-off or something like that. Block the towers. Just basically any kind of like a defensive spot.
So how would you recommend, like, if you wanted to take a third and have it be safe, like, would you usually put... So the bases in Stormgate, ideally you have your bases, and correct me if I'm wrong, at a 90-degree angle. It doesn't seem to matter which angle that is, but a knight, so either the north side or to the right side here. I know I mixed up in like east, but either way. Right. So that actually increases your mining efficiency because you can't use more than 12 imps. But if you wanted to defend this base, like with static defense or something like that, how would you set it?
I would probably set like 2 shroud stones, like to the right of the shrine, with making sure that it doesn't block imps, from returning the resources, and then the meat farms in front of the shroud stone, so it's harder to surround it.
So. In that case, is it because the meat farms don't actually draw aggro themselves, but the fell hogs do, so units would target the shroud stones? That's something so I've been using with sentry posts as Vanguard as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so then the units want to like surround the shroud stone, but the meat farm, blocks it from being fully surrounded by either fiends of your opponent or like dogs or lancers. Just makes it a little bit tougher to micro around.
Would you recommend like a sort of like hard wall or kind of like a staggered one, like you do in Protoss versus Zerg?
I think a hard wall is okay, but like the units are very smart by the way they move around in Stormgate already, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference. If you have a hard wall, for example, you can use magmadons as well to like go around that, and if you have a little bit of space between the buildings, the magmadons can kind of like block each other because they want to attack, right? So it's just a preference, I would say.
Yeah, Vanguard has more maneuverable melee units than lancers. So
yeah, for sure.
I think that's actually kind of a good point. You might get in your own way, because as a Vanguard player, I'm always looking to make it hard for the Infernals. So making these kind of little funnels and outposts works a lot better when they have things like Magmadons. But yeah, you're saying you don't want your Magmadons to get stuck behind their own building. So that makes sense. Would you change this up for versus Infernals if somehow the game got that far in?
No, not really, no. I think it stays the same pretty much. I think versus Vanguard, I also want to maybe put a Shroud Stone to the left side as well, because it's fairly common to be harassing with Hornets, which is like an air unit for the Vanguard. So you want to kind of keep the Luminite mining from both sides safe. Just to make sure that you are safe, right?
Hornets are pretty close to like a Banshee Viking sort of unit. For those who have yet to have the pleasure of dealing with that. So
the pleasure, oh my god.
Yeah. So, and I think another point is, how would you rate, compared to the static defense of Protoss, like, for example, like a Shroud Stone versus a cannon in effectiveness? A cannon is a 10. How strong is a Shroud Stone?
Depends versus which unit, I think. The units
just general usage, have... like, what can you expect from it?
It doesn't do a lot of damage, that's for sure.
So
the
like
attack
a 4.
speed is, that's a 4, yeah. 4, 5 maybe, yeah.
I think it has a very scary look in animation, I think, is what scares off a lot of people.
The sound.
Yeah, the sound is actually... Oh, I can't. I have sounds turned down a lot, but the sound is actually quite dramatic.
Not that scary, after all.
Not that scary when it's muted. But I think that a lot of people get intimidated. It is a little bit like cannons in SC2, where they aren't that strong, but the existence of them can sometimes deter players. So don't be too afraid of Shroud Stones, but... when combined, and as it stands right now, I think the Super Shroud Stone, the only way you can really, I guess it has a bit of a different look. No, it's about the same. It has the little timer bar, yeah. But it's the one that's attacking super. That one's extra dangerous.
This is a 10.
Yeah,
It's very dangerous. You basically run from it. This is kind of like the super battery of StarCraft 2 right now. You see this, you either snipe it or you run from it, because it does deal significant damage. But it does run out after 30 seconds. But the tower itself stays, so even though the timer of this, so the speed.
So you
and
just
the
got
damage,
yourself a Shroud Stone. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. It's a free Shroud Stone for 50, but the cooldown is a minute, so be careful how you use that, because it's a very good defensive tool.
Now I'm just noticing this right now. Do you ever check your opponent's Shroud Stone for how much energy they have, like in Infernal versus Infernal? Is that really a factor?
I've never done that. No.
I'm realizing now you can technically see how much Animus, and I've definitely seen it before, but I don't find... Okay, well, that brings us to the Nightfall Infestation ability. How often do you find yourself using that?
So, it's... I think it's a very effective tool if you know the fight is actually going to be happening. Most of the time, you will find it useful, surprisingly, in Infernal versus Infernal, simply because the Infernal units are very slow, I would say. and it's very hard to dodge this ability. Versus Vanguard, you're not going to be seeing. Well, you will be seeing use of it, but it's just easier for the Vanguard players to dodge it because the Vanguard players are the Vanguard units are simply faster. So basically, when you see that engagement is happening and you have like a good surround on your opponent, and you know most of the units are going to be infested, I think it's a very strong ability. But because of its 3-second cooldown, I don't find it to be extremely successful. Might as well save the animals for either the dragon later on, which I'm sure we'll be talking about, and the recharge ability.
So it's in that if it was cheaper kind of thing. It feels a bit like the Void Ray for Infernals, where it's like, yeah, I'd love to have it, but that thing is not very cheap and it's not very fast. So, like, yeah, I know it's a different type of thing.
1 second and a half, then maybe yes. I think that would be far more useful. But 3 seconds, I think it gives enough time for the player to react to that. I guess, well, the higher the level, the harder it will be to find use. I think on the lower level, it still might be very intimidating to play against.
Yeah, that big AoE radius does look very scary. And important to note, I believe when you click it, it goes to the center. It doesn't really have a circle indicator right now. So if
that's right.
But yeah, probably soon. Now, we talked about the Shroud Stone manifestation. I couldn't help but bring that one out. Though I did just learn, because usually I either try to snipe it or run away, and they usually have so many Shroud Stones that it's hard to tell the difference. But so the Shroud Stone manifestation, honestly, my experience is either you need it or you don't. So you use it if you need it and you have the Animus. Is there any sort of method to the madness, or is it a kind of an oh shit button for you most of the time?
It can be. Yeah, but like the higher the level, the less oh shits there are, right? So
that's some wisdom right there.
Especially I think in Infernal versus Infernals, simply because in the current build you can use the Shroud Stone offensively as well. You just
let's
not tell them. So yeah, just be careful when you use it, because it has a 60-second cooldown, and you are vulnerable throughout these 60 seconds if your opponent attacks you at a different location.
All right, and now Shadowfall, cool name, 75 energy, 3-minute cooldown, covers the entire map in Shroud.
The most useless. It's terrible. Like, it sounds amazing. Like, oh, the entire map is in Shroud, doom and gloom to your opponents. It's like
a Diablo effect.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Because very simply, like the Gaunt only has 20 white health. Like, you're only gaining, and it isn't instant. So units don't lose their white health off of Shroud. But they don't regain it till they're on Shroud. So you're saying that kind of the timing between them losing their white health and potentially regaining it is not meaningful enough to waste 75 energy on that ability for the most part?
For sure. Especially since you can carry Shroud with you with the transports of the Infernals, right? So
I didn't even have that on my list of things. I'm so new.
So when they land, they still put Shroud on the ground, but only when they land. And another interesting mechanic with the transportation of the Infernals is that you cannot pick up units while they are in the air. So you have to land your transport to carry the units to put the units inside or unload them. Unlike in StarCraft 2 or in Vanguards, where the transport unit can either unload or load units while still in the air. So
yeah, the evac for Vanguard does work right
exactly.
There. So it does. Now, this is important to note. When you dunk the Doombringer down and it splays out its like tentacle legs there or whatever it is, they automatically unload. So even if you didn't want to, yes, everything in there. So it's an automatic mass unload. The animation's pretty quick. It also has the ability to teleport to a friendly shrine, which takes what feels like almost exactly the same amount of time as a recall for Protoss, which I don't think I've ever seen anyone actually use that, but technically it's there. But there's a lot of utility in the Doombringer.
Yeah, I use it from time to time, but I'm not sure about it. Like, it doesn't feel right, in my opinion, to have this ability with this transportation. I mean, if Frost Giant and the guys want to keep it in there, sure, but I'm not buying the...
You're not buying the teleporting?
Recall. Yeah. I mean, they were supposed to have some kind of magic, I suppose, like summoning rituals, but there's like a teleport. I don't know, maybe it's okay, but I'm just not sold on this ability, but it can definitely be useful.
I think the splaying out Shroud thing makes a lot of sense, But the recall, like you said, is a little odd to have on it. Maybe that's just testing a mechanic, maybe because we don't really have tier 3 units yet, or even an idea. We might have an idea of what the Vanguard one is, but otherwise, I do think there's a lot in the works for that. So overall, the Doombringer, good for Shroud, and then a lot of the time against Vanguard, you'll do some... What do you usually drop in? Gaunts?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, most of the time you can have gaunts to infest the workers. Like most of the time you are dropping your opponent in the mineral lines, right? The economy area of your opponents, because that's the most vulnerable area most of the time. The Vanguard does have the counter mechanic to use the Bob overcharge, which increases the armor of the Bobs, so like more survivability, so it's harder to destroy them. So yeah, but you can still like pick up the units and go to the other location once they use on one of the command centers. So there's a good harassment tool. You can also use like a Magmadon with 4 guns inside of it. And it's a very strong harassment tool because when the Magmadon uses the stomp ability with an upgrade, it stuns the units inside of it, so it makes the worker retreat a little bit more difficult.
So what does your usual attack look like? In my experience, it's trying to drop in with the Doombringer, or at least drawing some attention, and then coming in with the main army. Is that a usual experience for you?
When you want to frontal attack, yeah, I mean, you just go for a frontal attack, right? But
Are there many opportunities to do a lot of two-pronged attacks, or you got to concentrate everything at the front?
I think so. I think as an Infernal, you kind of have to attack at many places at once, because if you only focus on one side, it's kind of easy to out-micro. So I think when you're not paying attention, when you're playing versus Infernal, there's a high chance you're going to be losing a lot. So like a counterattack with Gaunts and Fiends or a Magmadon, even in small numbers, can be devastating because of the Infest ability. So I think splitting your units as Infernal is quite important. Somewhat similar to Zerg, right? You kind of want to have a run by there, a Baneling run by there. So it's very, very similar here for Zerg. And you want to do a lot of flanking when your opponent is like out on the map. I think if you just go from one direction, most of the time you're not going to be finding much success engagement-wise as Infernal, simply because your units are, well, very slow.
Well, all right. So I think the biggest struggle right now, according to the limited win rates we have, Infernals, it's pretty intuitive how to win in the first 10 minutes. I think most players kind of get the idea. You just get a bunch of units, you try to overrun them and snowball with Infest. But then once the Vanguard gets kind of their bio ball of like upgraded medics and exos and whatever they can put with it, it becomes very difficult. Statistically, Infernal's not winning nearly as much. What is your experience? How would you deal with that? What kind of late game units would you choose against that composition?
I would definitely advise not to make too many guns versus Vanguard, because the way that the Vanguard frontal units, Lancers, work is the more you hit them, the faster they become and the faster attack speed they have. And the guns have this like a glaive attack where they bounce to 3 nearby enemy units. So the more you attack with the guns, the faster they are and the faster attack speed they have. Plus the guns, they really don't deal that much damage to the Lancers themselves. So I would advise not to spam this unit versus Vanguard, in the later stages of the game especially. And your main unit, main damage has to be Magmadon. It's like very sturdy, well, as fast as it gets, like you don't really get a much faster unit than it is, or than the Fiends. And this ability, the Stomp ability, is your main point of damage and the way that you engage. Vanguard player wants to dodge it. You want to make sure it hits as many units as possible. So flanking from different directions, making sure that each flank does include at least one Magmadon to make it easier, will definitely bring you lots of success. Once the armies get very, very big, try to get some Flaming Imps there as well. They work kind of like a Baneling, but the Flaming Imp only lasts for 4 seconds, so make sure to use this wisely and time your attacks properly, otherwise you're going to be losing workers for nothing.
I think an important point, just some tips from me, because the only ways I've been able to win against late game Vanguard is with Flaming Imps. One is if you don't attack move your Imps, they don't get threat priority, which is nice, because much like StarCraft, workers won't get targeted if there's an army unit nearby. So until you use the Flame On ability, which can be right next to them potentially, the Imps won't get targeted. And it's kind of like Disruptors, where the first wave is going to do the most damage as well. So if you can break them with the first set before they even realize what's happening. But otherwise, they are incredibly similar to Banelings in how they work. Also, I want to just touch on. I'm surprised I didn't start with this, but the quick build, because I was going to reference the imps don't take the same rally point as the quick build. I found myself very quickly, puns I guess intended, using the quick build for units, but not so much for buildings. Can you talk to us about how, do you have any different sort of control scheme from StarCraft 2 and how you'd set up your buildings and units?
Not yet. Because I still play StarCraft 2, and the Stormgate is still far from being done. So I want to make sure that my habits don't I don't lose my habits from StarCraft 2. So I still control like all my production facilities. I still control all of my shrines and so on to make sure that when I go back to play StarCraft, it's not like I'm searching for the quick macro thing. So yeah, I basically do everything the same in Stormgate, even though I have the availability in Stormgate. The one thing that I use is just the quick macro buildings in the late game where I just want to spam, multiple meat farms or production facilities. That is actually very useful in the late game.
Yeah, you just got to be a little careful if you want something now. It isn't perfect which worker it will pick, but if you want it eventually, then it's like eventually you just need the Shroud Stones. Saving those couple seconds could be all the difference for both sides as well, both Infernals and Vangaurd. So you can just copy paste your sort of StarCraft control scheme, and because we have hotkey customizability, just go ahead and use it here. All right, the last thing for Infernals, and the biggest one, the dragon. Talk to me about the dragon. What is the dragon? Why is the dragon? How is the dragon? The dragon.
Yeah, the dragon is definitely, I would say it is kind of the only tier 3 unit that we currently have in the game. It costs very, very much because it's 500 Luminite and Therium, so it's kind of like the mothership equivalent in Stormgate. But it's not quite the minus 500 meme, because it is kind of a useful unit. It has a lot of HP, and it has quite a lot of especially single target damage. The other thing is when you have the dragon and you have the Infest ability, it spawns double the fiends from the Infest. So it's very strong in the late game, but the fiends in the late game are not that strong, but it helps you to snowball the fight. If you start winning it, then your army just suddenly becomes huge because of the double fiends from the Infest of the dragon. And yeah, it just lots of damage, lots of tanking. Also has like this kind of inhale ability, which inhales the Infest of the current units that you have around the dragon, and it restores white health because of that. So strong unit, very, very expensive. I wouldn't
I'm still
say
trying to get the
always want
Therium.
to have it.
Takes quite a bit. But yeah, so the dragon it's more usable than, less niche than the mothership. Like if you have the money in the late game and you have the Animus, you should get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good unit to have it if you can afford it. Prioritizing it, not sure about it yet, but definitely a strong unit. You don't really see it very often in the games, I think, but in Infernal versus Infernal, the fights kind of get very funny when both players are trying to destroy the dragon, and like pretty much the only anti-air that you have as Infernal is the guns, which they deal very, very little damage to the dragon, and then the other anti-air you have the shadow flyers from the Twilight Spire, which I mean they're kind of like the Scourge. You can also use the Spriggans, which decrease the attack speed of the unit that you are attacking, or production facility can also be decreased. Their production speed can be decreased as well if you attack them with the Spriggans, but they are not really useful. I think the Spriggans are equally like the Void Ray in Protoss. They just don't have a role here currently in Stormgate, and I wish they will they will find their way in the future builds of Stormgate.
So overall, just too costly for the effect you get both against Infernal and Vanguard?
Yes, I think versus both. There are some situations where you can use Spriggans, for example, versus Vulcans, but nobody really uses Vulcans now versus Infernal, because it's all about like the bio ball, the mobility, because Vulcans are just like too slow. So Spriggans really don't find that much use. They're not very costly, but like 75 is not super expensive, but you'd much rather spend that Therium, the gas, on Magmadons or something else.
All right. Is there any unit we haven't? The Hellborne. We talked about how it has a cool effect, but the Hellborne, does it have a place right now?
I would say, well, it's the first time that we see the Hellborne in the game. I think it's in a somewhat healthy spot where it does some damage in a cone behind the unit that you target fire. They are dangerous in high numbers. In small numbers, you don't even see them. They're here. They have like a cool animation, but the time to shoot for them is just so long, and you can like micro away from it, and yeah, they're just kind of clunky to control. I think they will definitely need some polish here and there. But
a diet plan
versus
would help.
Slow health. Sorry?
A diet plan would probably help the most.
Yeah.
They're so large.
Yeah, very, very hard to control, and they get blocked. At least they have a very long range. That's like their good thing. And once there's like a lot of sentry posts or shroud stones or whatever, they actually destroy buildings relatively quickly. So I would say they are good versus buildings and good versus low HP units like guns and exos. That's when you can find some use for them.
So you can probably see them in the next version of the game. Likely they'll be a little more usable. I think they're a super cool unit and give like some personality to the Infernals. But yeah, they take about 3 years to line up their shot. I find that the Lancers have already gotten on top of them by the second shot is a lot of the time the issue. But
they're surprisingly not tanky. Even though they seem to have like a lot of HP, 250, they just die super quickly.
They have 10 more HP than a brute. So yeah, definitely not the most tanky thing. Oh yeah, and the Weaver has 720 HP, and it essentially has the Viper Abduct ability. Talk to me for a second about the Weaver.
So Weaver has the percentage amount of damage, so it deals a lot of damage to units with high health. So like Magmadons, Vulcans, Atlas, or something like, or another Weaver is very effective against. But versus small units like Guns or Fiends, it deals like no damage whatsoever. I think if it wasn't so slow as it is right now, it would be a very good unit. I like the Abduct ability. You can pull certain units, but because it's so slow and it's actually a light unit without any armor, it just dies super quickly, even despite having so much HP. But it has this consume ability, which restores the many white health that the Weaver has, 180, which is like a lot of health in RTS. So once you consume the Fiend, you instantly regenerate all of it. So you can keep them alive eating lots of your own Fiends. So lots of microbility for the Weaver outside of walking it.
Well, thank you, Mana, for teaching us a lot more than even I knew about Infernals. Not that I'm the paragon. Yes, even I, the paragon of all RTS knowledge. But yeah, I've played about 100 games so far, split between them, and still a lot of that stuff is new for me. And even though a lot of it's going to be changed, I think the general theme of Infernals is going to stay. You're going to have things like Fiends and Shroud. And oh yeah, you could have multiple dragons as well. But if the game went on that long, you're probably mining out to be...
I've never actually seen multiple dragons in any of my
games.
It's
a 5-minute cooldown, and most games are done within 20 minutes. So it's
also
very hard to get
animus,
there.
Which is a lot to gather during those games. So yeah, definitely... not very common, but you can do that, yeah.
Thank you again to Mana for being such a great sport, as it took so long and so much information to go over that we ended up wanting to split it into 2 different videos, one for Infernals, obviously, and also for the Vangaurd coming out soon, if you guys have the interest. Mana, obviously more experience with Infernals, but still plenty to talk about with the Vangaurd. But at the very end, I asked him about his thoughts on the game in general, compared to StarCraft 2, and the future of both games, and, well, here's his answer. Make sure to go check him out, like and subscribe to both channels, would be awesome. Check the description for Mana's. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, you're amazing, you're breathtaking, and I hope I made your day, and, well, Mana made your day a little bit better. Speaking of future builds, and in general, thank you, Mana, for your comprehensive just the sheer amount of knowledge, stuff I learned. I've been playing all the builds and the beta, and I still learned a ton here. So first, where can people find you? The link is in the description, but we all know that that's way too far. So where can they find you?
Thanks for having me. I was glad that I was able to help a bit and share the knowledge of like pro gamer here. If you want to watch me, I'm doing quite a lot of YouTube nowadays, try to upload every day. If you want to find me, it's youtube.com/manaesports. I do StarCraft 2 content and as much Stormgate content as possible. So if you try to find some cool games, fun games, they're there as well. If you're looking for some pro player tournaments, they are there as well. So lots of content there. I also stream a bit on twitch.tv/liquidmana or twitter.com/liquid_mana. So you can find me there.
And the last note, I think for people who aren't sure about Stormgate yet, don't know what to think of it. As someone, you've played StarCraft 2 professionally for, I want to say, more than a decade now. And it's been kind of your life in one way or another. How are you feeling about Stormgate as not a replacement, but at least something that could eventually either replace or take some of the role of StarCraft 2 in RTS? And are you optimistic?
For sure, this is the biggest competitor to StarCraft that we ever had. From like the new RTSs, like of course StarCraft 2 and like Warcraft 3 kind of like coexist. But I think it's definitely the toughest competition. It's not there yet. I'm very hopeful for Stormgate. I know the people behind it are capable of creating greatness. I know they have big plans for the game. And if they will be able to make these plans come true, it will compete with StarCraft big time. Could overtake, but we will have to see in the future. Definitely optimistic. There's still so much to add. There's still so much to see in Stormgate. We're not even like halfway for the game, I think, right now, and it's still very fun to play. For example, when I play competitively, I can distinguish the good guys from the very good guys to the actual top guys, which makes me think that there's like a lot of like skill ceiling here, and it also feels very familiar to play. The moment I touched Stormgate, immediately I felt like it's familiar. Like I knew exactly what to do. Like there's resources here, the units are going here and there. It's not everything is polished yet, but there's just so much potential, and I'm looking forward to see how Stormgate is going to be seen in the next few months or years.
Well, thank you, man, for absolutely everything. Good luck and have fun.
Thank you.